Okay, well, I think that this is going to be an exciting evening, because I'm going to present a little bit about the book and the Dramatic Play Center, and I hope that you can, if you have something you want to say about that, that would be great. And then I'm going to turn over the meeting to Ron, because I saw a video of his school and it looks absolutely, just was intriguing to me. It looked like I would like all the schools that I worked in to look like that or something like it. And then I realized that he was doing the storytelling that came out of the work of Vivian Gusson Paley. And I don't know how many of you know about that, but it's very, very interesting. And I thought it would be interesting to ask Patsy here, because Patsy worked with Vivian and has written about this. So, and she's here, so I'm very excited about that. So the dramatic, I was rereading my chapter, and I was with a lot of chuckles, reading the beginning dialogue that I put in between Evelyn and Jeff. And it's interesting because Evelyn, her name is not really Evelyn. I did that for the book. Her name is Ivana, actually. She's now a Facebook friend of mine. And I see her like as an adult, and I see so much of what I saw right here. I see this in the adult Ivana, which is must be about 29 now. And it's just very funny to see that. So when I was rereading it, then I actually forgot that that I did mention Vivian Gusson Paley, because here was Ivana and Jeffrey, all right, and they're in the dramatic play area, and I could picture Ivana. She was wearing an old concert dress of my daughter's that was cut down, and high heels, and she's teetering about with it, and it just was so interesting to see her with a baby. And then she goes to Jeff, and her baby's dying, and he said, not to worry, don't worry. And he took like a play injection out, and he jabbed the baby, and the baby's alive, everything's okay. Ivana pays him, and she teeters off. And gee, if life could be like that, but that's the way life was to them. That's the way she saw things. And in the book, Vivian Gusson Paley refers to this type of play in which the dead can be instantly resurrected as magical play. In Boys and Girls, Superheroes in the Doll Corner, I don't know if you've read that, it's a really wonderful book. She writes, the same magic destroys and resurrects, creates an orphan or mother, or the green slime. The ability to imagine something is the magic. Putting it into action is the play. Playing it out is the safe way to discharge the idea. And what was interesting is that I read that book actually after I left my classroom. And had I read that book when I was still teaching, I would have done things differently. I would have done things very differently, actually, because I didn't allow like gangster play, or the play where they were like bang bang banging or something like that. And she talks about how we will accept fairy tales and that type of play, which has a lot of violence in it in its own way, and not accept this other like superhero play. And I think I would have done it differently. I would not have said, no, you can't be a superhero here, be it in the schoolyard, but not in the classroom. So I would have done things very differently, but can't go back again. So the setting up of anyway, I'm curious. What do any of you think about that and your own classrooms or your own schools? You just speak up if you want to.
I worked with a wonderful woman who's no longer with us, but one of my first mentors in a school was very much a person who believed in peace. She would describe herself as a hippie, And we had a lot of conversations about this in our school. And what we came up with was talking to children about how sometimes some of that kind of play can make some people feel unsafe. So we came with a place in the classroom where if you changed your mind and you didn't, like, if you wanted to shoot someone, you had to ask them if they wanted to play a shooting game and if they could be shot. And if they said yes, then you could, but if they said no, they didn't want to play that game, that was the rule. You couldn't shoot somebody who didn't want to be shot. And then we also had a place like the home living or like dramatic play was always a safe place. The home place was always the safe place. And if you changed your mind, you didn't want to be shot, then that would be your place to go. And you could say, this is my safe place. I changed my mind. So that's how but we did a lot of talking about it. And I think some of the novelty or some of the taboo of it was worn off because there were so many conversations about the play that was happening.
Yeah.
And a lot of it happened when I lived in Washington, DC after, do you remember the sniper? There was a guy and his adopted son, and they were like, so the kids were always looking out the window like, there's the sniper, like hide. And so it was a play that was relevant to their lives and they needed to play this out. And we also had to figure out a way to play it that wasn't like elevating fears. And it's tricky, but that was our approach. I don't know.
Right. David, what do you think about that in terms of running a school?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, we have some Ukrainian students who are with us now in a music class. The instrumental teacher was doing like wah 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 sounds on early instrumentation, and she was going around the room saying, what do you all hear? And most of the students, local students, were talking about, oh, it's an ambulance. It's something that was a sign of safety, of comfort, of reassurance, of. And then the Ukrainian students were like, oh, that's the sound when the bombs come. And then, so in terms of that comment about a narrative or a story that's meaningful to the lived experience, I think you have to honor that.
That's right.
I think finding that sort of place of dialogue around how do we do that, and what does that mean? I mean, there's a lot of writing too about fairy tales giving constructs to this to make the idea of death safer in the minds of young children too. So I think, that superhero genre, that idea that, the resurrection can kind of happen, this magical play. I think there's something important in that. I think, what I don't like, I guess, is what I prefer is play that doesn't just reproduce sort of narrative storylines that are tied to, genres that are commodified. So, you're going to play a certain kind of superhero who functions in a really particular kind of limited way with the bad guy, where this is these standard storylines are constantly being lived out and reproduced by the kids because that's what's on TV. Right. My preference is, if there's going to be this kind of negotiation with this sort of play, it's tied to something they're imagining in the moment and creating out of their stories. And I think for me, there's no real answer to it. I think it's something that has to be just kind of emerge in the classroom. In the lived experience of the composition of that room, those experiences. And I think it has to be really delicate. And I think my role there as an administrator would be to support that conversation with teachers and with the students, and try to find that balance of engaging in really difficult stuff in a safe kind of a way. Right. I don't know if that's sort of a workaround answer, but.
No. That makes sense. Anybody want to speak on that? Or yeah, Ron?
I think that what Lauren described about, the gunplay, we do that too. We make sure that the people being shot really want to be in that kind of play and make sure that's happening. And so, yeah, that makes sense. That's what we do. And David's comment about, as an administrator, figuring out ways to make that play more meaningful, or not just about that commodified, superhero story. So actually one year, every year there's always some superhero play, but one year we really took that play and went deeper, I think, talking about what makes a superhero, what are the values for a superhero or a villain, and start constructing that and having the children create stories around that. And they actually created their own superheroes. Well, they explored superheroes like Superman, but also, real life superheroes, and coming up with their own origin stories. And then eventually they made their characters and all sorts of different scenarios. They built things. They actually did a stop action animation film. So that's how we kind of converted that just commodified, Iron Man thing going around the classroom and just going on a deeper level and linking it back to all the learning we do through stories. And I
Right.
actually remember as a 7-year-old, we were in a car accident with my family, and we were okay. Everyone was okay afterwards. But I remember distinctly going back to my room and playing with my Legos and reenacting the whole thing with my cars crashing and the police coming. And I remember my dad being upset with me, saying, "You shouldn't do that." And because he thought, yeah, he's not an educator, and I know now what was going on with myself. But he was upset because he felt like I was playing with it or not taking it seriously. But I think, with the lived experiences, obviously, compared to the children from Ukraine, this is different. But we have to work through that in our own way as children or as people. And so I definitely think that allowing certain types of, whether it's gunplay or superhero play or aggressive play, we still need to find a way to let them have that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm not going back into my classroom now, but if I mentally would go back into my classroom, I would have a very different attitude towards this. And I think that Vivian Gusson Paley's book really had a big impact on me. Too late. And should have been earlier. But I think the things you're saying are right about, well, I mean, even in the schoolyard. I mean, in the schoolyard, they did any, they could do any kind of play, but I said that you can't hurt somebody if they feel like they're getting hurt, which is kind of what I think you were saying, Laura. So if somebody says that they don't want to be shot, you cannot shoot them. That's not safe for them. They don't feel safe. But back to the classroom dramatic play area. One thing I feel is that it sometimes I find it upsetting isn't the right word, but when it becomes just the kitchen, right? So like when I hear teachers and the kids are picking their choice, who would like to go to the kitchen? And who would like to go to the block area, and it so limits the kind of play that the children can do, and I think that one of the wonderful things about the dramatic play area is that it just allows such unbridled kind of play, and it's fun to watch and it's interesting to watch. And I give an example in here of one time when I was watching the children in dramatic play, and I just noticed that they were always playing Castle and King and Queen, and it might have had something to do with the books I was reading. I don't remember what I was reading then, or just what they were doing. And so I got into discussions with the class about that, and we ended up actually visiting. I thought it'd be fun to visit a castle, but I couldn't think of a castle. But we had a student teacher the semester before, who went on to become a docent at St. John the Divine, a very big, unbelievably beautiful church in Manhattan. And it looks like a castle. It has all sorts of things that look like a castle. So we visited St. John the Divine. And when we got back, the kids they were made in the art area, they were making rose windows, because she talked to them about the rose windows, and they were using almost like tie-dyed paper towels and things, and putting it up on the windows. If somebody came in my classroom, they wouldn't understand what was going on the windows in my classroom, but we had rose windows, and it just made a big impact on them. So I feel like I want to get through this quickly because I'm so eager to see Ron's Ron's doing, but I think also like making it as open-ended as possible and adding a lot of possibilities. And I put some things on page 108, 109 about things that you might possibly add to the dramatic play area. And so, like, for example, if the children are playing, talking to each other on the phone, and of course now it would be a cell phone, but we had like a telephone in the dramatic play area, then you could talk about that with the children. And like, like if you're talking to people on the phone, is there anything that you might need? You might need a telephone book. It would be different now because I don't actually think people use telephone books now, right? but a notepad for taking notes, and so we would add things as it came up. Wouldn't be in there at the beginning, but as listening to the children and watching their play, then new things would be added to it. I'm actually going to I'm just too eager to hear what Ron says. We can get back to unless somebody has a question or something that they want to ask, right? And just shout it out or write it in the chat. So I am going to hand this over to Ron, who I didn't even realize. Ron, you said you were from New York originally. Is that it?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
No,
But now you're living now in Taiwan and
in Taiwan. Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And he sent me a video of from his school, and I thought it was so interesting. And so I'm going to make you the host, right? See if I can do this right. Right. Oops. Here we go. Okay, Ron. You're
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ron, and I'm living in Taiwan now, but I'm a U.S. expat originally from New York City. Actually, I was living in New York City and New Jersey in the Princeton area all my life until 2015, when we moved here to Taiwan. And actually, so my wife is also from New York. She's a Taiwanese American. And around the time that we were considering becoming, parents, that's when I started reading books. We started reading books about parenting, as if, reading books would prepare me for being a parent. But, I was reading about it, and then got to education, and then quickly became early childhood education. And I was reading about Montessori, which before that I had just some vague idea that it's something about a preschool. But reading about her was really eye-opening. And then started reading about John Dewey, experiential learning. Somehow I even got to Vygotsky. I think because constructivism and then social constructivism got to Vygotsky, and I was, wow, this is amazing. And then finally discovered the municipal preschools of Reggio Emilia. And that really lit a fire for both of us. We were just saying, wow, this is really exciting. And I was thinking, oh yeah, I can imagine doing these projects at home with my children who we don't have yet. And then finally we decided, we want to change careers and open early childhood schools like this. And in the back of my mind, I always knew as well, my in-laws, they've been running preschools throughout Taiwan or Taipei for over 40 years. So when they heard about us wanting to open early childhood schools, they said, well, why don't you come to Taiwan and open them here? And so we said yes. So we jumped. Early 2015 is when we moved here with my 1.5-year-old daughter. Now we have 3 children, and we've been here ever since. And so we came with a vision of education, well, English immersion education, that focuses on project-based learning, meaningful learning experiences. And we knew that there was sort of a gap with that kind of education in English immersion education in Asia. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in Asia, English is very popular. And there's this whole field of English immersion education for children of all ages. But unfortunately for early childhood, it's a lot about drilling, phonics and vocabulary, and not so much meaningful learning. So we came with the idea that, okay, we need to change that around and do things, we felt a more effective way. So In 2016, we opened our first school, Little Seeds Academy. Again, using project approach, we actually modified the teaching strategies, creative curriculum, that format, and tried to bring that out. Around 2018, I started taking auditing a class on early childhood. This is before I got my master's. And that's when I discovered two pivotal educators in my mind. One was Vivian Paley and Story Workshop out of Opal School,
Mhm.
which really changed my idea. It was really pivotal for me, and it really added a lot to our curriculum at Little Seeds, and eventually my school, Tinker Seeds, that we opened in 2019. So why don't I show the video on Tinker Seeds first, and then we'll talk more about it.
So you have to do a share screen.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Do you see the video so far?
Um, there's a, it's not being shown as a video, but, right? No, right.
Not yet.
See a picture. You see a picture.
Okay.
You see a picture.
Yeah. Let me know if the sound is okay.
Okay.
Tinker Seeds Children's Workshop is an independent early childhood learning community in Taipei.
Good.
We serve families with young children ages 3 to 8 in an English language immersion environment. We offer a morning half-day program for 3 to 6-year-old children and an after-school English enrichment program for lower elementary school students. Tinker Seeds began with the idea of exploring children's ingenuity through stories. Children want to learn and acquire the tools for language to share the stories they are living in order to make sense of and connect with the world around them. To this end, we follow an emergent curriculum approach that is both children-centered and teacher-guided. Inspired by the work of Vivian Gusson Paley in her storytelling curriculum, we make time for two core activities: story dictation and story acting. The process starts with children approaching us one-on-one to tell us an original story, usually inspired by their play. As the story is told, we write down their words, sometimes pausing to ask questions, but not to quiz them, but to find out more about their ideas, make note of their interests, and to opportunistically extend their logical thinking and language development in authentic ways. Later that same day, a few of these stories are selected for story acting. First, we read the story aloud to the whole class. Then, we read the story again, but this time serving as narrator and stage director while the children act out the story as it's told.
Sticks. Trevor saw the sticks. But Kimberly wasn't looking. Kimberly was looking at the flowers. Can you be a flower? Yeah, I'm gonna say flower. Then Trevor wandered away. And then Kimberly said, Trevor. You say, Trevor, does the flower smell good? So I turned around, but I only saw the pond full of sticks. So I called, Trevor! There was no answer. I was getting worried, a little bit worried, but really worried. I looked around the pond, and I finally found him behind a log. I said, let's go home. Trevor said, okay.
Story dictation and dramatization allow children to engage with their stories in an experiential and collaborative way. It's an engaging and meaningful opportunity for language, social, emotional, and cognitive development driven by the stories that captivate their imagination. Children's interests are captured in the stories they tell us every day. And eventually, we identify lines of inquiry from among those interests that are worth exploring further. Our curriculum emerges from among these children-initiated ideas that are then supported intentionally by the teachers. Here's an example from earlier this year in our 4 to 5-year-old classroom. During choice time, we found the children interested in pizza shops, cafes, stores, and also travel. These interests manifested themselves in the stories they told and in their dramatic play. Before long, the idea of building a hotel took shape. The children shared and constructed knowledge about hotel customer experiences, room amenities, and even explored aesthetics and architectural design. The project went beyond learning just about hotels, though. They practiced problem solving and design thinking, and they also learned about one another and the world as they accessed and interacted with each other's funds of knowledge. This was an example of taking children's interests and intentionally extending their lines of inquiry in a meaningful and engaging project for the whole class. Underpinning our emergent curriculum approach is our attention to aesthetics. The design of learning spaces contribute to the pedagogical experiences of the children and teachers who inhabit those spaces. We carefully designed our environment as a place to learn and to live in. Natural light pours in from large windows to create rich sensorial experiences. Our classrooms are adaptable in a flexible way to be responsive to the needs of the learning that takes place within. Access to resources like the sink for washing, writing tools for documentation, and other materials are within easy reach for the children. This supports their development of self-efficacy, leading to a sense of flow as they work, build relationships, and thrive. The materials that fill up the shelves in our classrooms are chosen intentionally to support symbolic play and open-ended exploration. In addition to staples like wooden blocks and art supplies, we're also drawn to natural materials and the beauty of repurposing found items for their interesting and unique properties. Found items like ribbons, old jewelry, and other loose parts are used throughout the year in children's play, projects, and stories. The open-ended nature of this beautiful stuff offers opportunities for children to discover their endless potential. As Antoinette Portis points out, after all, a stick is not just a stick. Our cycle of work with the children is not only engaging, lively, and fun for both children and teachers, it also serves a purpose: to support children's transition from having immature, reactive behaviors to having deliberate and intentional behaviors. From stories to projects, block play to play plans, and observational drawings to construction, we're witnessing children become more deliberate and intentional in their thinking and doing, setting the stage for developing their imagination, critical thinking, and higher mental functions. Thank you for watching our showcase. We invite you to reach out to us for more information. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Tinkerseeds.
Wow, I find that so interesting. Can you tell me what are the age? What's the age span? You might have said that, and I might have missed it. The age span.
So for Tinker Seeds, we have a morning half-day preschool program, ages 3 to 6, which actually in Taiwan, when I say preschool, I also include kindergarten. So it's still separate from first grade elementary school. And then in the afternoons, we have an English enrichment program for ages 5 to 8. So kindergarten through grade 2.
So the 5 to 8-year-olds, where are they in the morning?
They're usually in either it's a kindergarten or first and second grade elementary, which in Taiwan, the public school system for first and second graders, they have half days every day except Tuesday. And then third and fourth grade is I think two half days, and then fifth and sixth is 1 half day, and then after that it's full day for everybody.
So would you like the children who are going to the regular school, public school, and then coming to you in the afternoon, when they're in their public school in the morning, is it traditional type school, or does it align more with what you're doing? Is that, I don't know if my question is clear, but.
Oh, you broke up there for a second.
Oh, so when they go to another school in the morning, what is their school like in the morning? Like, is it different than what you're doing or similar?
Very different. Public schools will be, they're in their desks and, the teacher is in front of them and it's different subjects, different teachers come into their classrooms.
Mhm.
And there's even some English, a little bit. And so what most parents are looking for from us is, well, they like the way we approach English language learning and they want it to be more meaningful. And that's why they come to the after school program.
Right. I'm just wondering how it might be possible for your school to influence other schools. I remember one of the times when I was in Reggio Emilia, somebody quoted Lawrence Malaguzzi, because when I asked a question about, see, my daughter, we lived in Italy when she was like between 4 and 6.5. And she went to Italian schools the whole time. She went to Montessori school for 2 years, but then she went into the state school, and the state school was just as you said, like the teacher was on a platform in the front, and the children were in rows and they wore little uniforms, and there was a crucifix right above the teacher, because at the time they had this agreement with Mussolini that hadn't now, but I don't think they have it anymore, but when we lived there, they had that. It was so different. And so I asked when I went to Reggio Emilia, like, what happens to the children when they leave your preschool and go into the state school? Because I know what the state is like. And what they said is, Malaguzzi said, most children go to school with 2 pockets, but our children go to school with 3 pockets. And for me, it wasn't enough. I felt like this had to spread, like, how could this spread? And I think it is a little bit actually in Italy. I think from what I've heard from friends that more schools are being influenced by what's happening in Reggio Emilia. So it just seems like it would be so wonderful if other schools could be influenced by what's happening in your school. Anyway, that's my 2 cents, right?
It's interesting because a lot of parents from our preschool programs always ask, so what's next? What can we do to keep this learning going on? And actually I've been exploring, there's an experimental education act in Taiwan where I'm working with a foundation now to establish a bilingual experimental elementary school in Taipei that brings a lot of what we're doing at Tinker Seeds into a reality for some. So we're hoping to open next year, actually. So it's something we're working on,
Right.
or that I'm helping to bring out.
Right. Patsy, when you saw what they were doing with the storytelling, was it how you envisioned it, or was something different?
Like Ron, I founded a preschool in Houston. And I imitated Paley's work in storytelling and story acting in my Chicago kindergarten for several years. Then when I moved to Houston, I founded a preschool, really an all-day program for 18 months through 5s. And the only criteria I had, other than educational background for my teachers, was the willingness to be trained in the Paley work, and which is storytelling, story acting. And from what I saw in the video, what Ron has established in his school is very close to what Vivian had in mind. And when I saw Vivian's room, the only difference I would say goes to, and Ron, you didn't address this, but it came up a moment ago, which is the issue of content of the children's stories, because Vivian took a very hard line. And I encourage anybody on the screen who hasn't read Vivian's 13 books, but you could start with Wally Stories and Boys and Girls. I actually think her tour de force is You Can't Say, You Can't Play. But, and the research I've done on Paley's work and the creation of the School Literacy Project based on her work at Rice University that I started really takes Vivian's hard line on content, which is it's the content that children want to tell. And so if they have superheroes on their mind, that's what they tell about. And Vivian wrote quite elegantly on the need for children to borrow ideas from popular culture, to sort of like Ron's story of the car accident, to work through the things that are on their minds through stories. And popular culture is on their minds, and that contains a lot of superheroes. And as Vivian also discusses, we as educators need to think through our stance on pretend play and whether we think the superheroes are other than iconic figures for the children to work through issues of control, issues of fear, issues of fairness. And so that's why it's important that all the bad guys die or get locked up or something, because young children continually try to right the world. But one thing that I think is really interesting to think about, especially in this, if you will forgive me, day and age, is that when we ban superheroes, we don't ban princesses. And so it's a very biased position where little girls get to imagine whatever, but little boys are shut down. And Vivian talked a lot about that and talked about the way in which boys are often alienated from the preschool culture in some subtle way, because it's mostly run by women and it's mostly dictated by certain kind of social mores about being nice. So the thing that Ron didn't share, and I'd love for him to share, is the difference, if you have any experience, the difference between guided play, which is really important, and a lot of people talked about this, where you set up a real learning situation and you guide the children to that goal, and unguided play, which Vivian endorsed through the storytelling in the sense that she saw storytelling as play and let them tell whatever they wanted to tell. And which often got into replication stories and popular culture stories, but she felt strongly that this was the way children were managing the world. I don't know if.
Yeah, that's great. So we definitely look for the stories. So stories we look at, now in the video, what you saw was the after school program, and that was actually my daughter and oldest son, Logan and Kimberly, talking about their little brother, Trevor, being lost in the woods somewhere. But in our morning program at Tinker Seeds, there's choice time. And during choice time, our teachers are there interacting with the children, but also looking for the stories that they're telling. And that's where we get a lot of those stories coming out from them. And that's where I don't think it's so much a guided play there. I think it's unguided play as we help them articulate their ideas, find ideas for those things. And actually during that choice time, during that story dictation part, that's where we see a lot of the kernels for a lot of the projects that take place. That's when we're talking about that hotel project that came about. Superheroes came about from choice time, just listening to their stories, and it just evolves from there. And I think that's a really interesting part for us in an English immersion program in Asia. This Paley's work really was amazing to us, because to me, I just felt like if we're doing project approach and we're teaching them English at the same time, it can be very difficult to have conversations without building up the vocabulary and language structures in English. But with Paley's storytelling, it was really going into exactly what the children wanted to tell us. They were just so much more engaged because they saw us as not just trying to teach them English, but we're trying to give them the tools to express themselves. And they're that much more engaged in the language learning because everything's about their stories that they want to tell. So it was really instrumental and changed the way I thought about how we can work with the children in an English language learning experience.
I totally see it, and we see it in our work in the States in helping all children, but also with a special, I think, value for children whose narrative skills and oral storytelling skills and the command of English vocabulary is not competitive with some of their upper class or, peers or children whose parents are highly educated. And it really is, I mean, the research is there. It's really come along. And Ron, if I can say, in 2011, I did a traveling conference in Taiwan on Paley's work. And I found the different educators I met around Taiwan in the 3 major cities to be wonderfully receptive to the work. I mean, it was a very exciting time for me. Anyway.
Yeah, maybe that will inspire you, Ron, to try to organize something there.
So there was one of Paley's books, sorry, was Boy on the Beach. And
That's
I
her
think
last. That's her last book.
Oh, so many books. And she was writing to Yu Ching Huang
Yeah.
in Taiwan. I think that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So when I had heard about that book, I was searching for Yu Ching Huang and her story corner. I couldn't find her, for a couple
friends
years.
with her. Did you find her?
And then, so then I enrolled at Erickson Institute in
Oh, there you
Chicago
go.
for the
Yeah,
master's
yeah.
with Gillian McNamee.
Right.
Was the whole reason I went to Erickson for Gillian McNamee, because she worked as Paley's assistant too. And then Dr. McNamee came to Taiwan to keynote an early childhood conference, and she had agreed to come to meet me at Tinker Seeds, and she had, of course, someone to help her go around Taipei, and so they came here, and I didn't know, but it was Yu Ching, and then Jillian, and we're talking, and said, "Oh, this is Yu Ching Huang." She would said, "Oh my God, I've been looking for you for like the past 2 years, and it's amazing. Here's Gillian McNamee, my professor. Here's Yu Ching Huang," and it was absolutely amazing. It was wonderful to meet her. She actually honored us with doing some story acting with us. I videotaped it. I still have it and play it to my staff. And just watching her work was amazing. And then last year, we also invited her back to talk to the rest of our staff as a professional development, and just talking about her work with Paley and everything. It was really amazing. So now I think Yu Ching is also working with schools around Taiwan to talk about storytelling, story acting. I know she recently had a paper published in that journal, I think Schools, which I got a subscription to, luckily, just as they published whole Vivian Paley
Yeah, it was a symposium
issue.
for Paley.
Yes, the symposium, yeah.
We were part
So
of
I
it.
have that.
Yeah.
And actually, Patricia, soon after I learned about Paley, I found a few of your papers and read them. And I still have the highlighted version here that I sent to my staff, and we looked at it and it said, this is Vivian Paley, and this is how we're going to approach it, and this is why it works. And so, getting to meet you also is a big honor for me.
Well, actually, Renee, I don't know if you remember, but Zoe, who's on the screen here, when she was your co-teacher at 321, I came and trained Zoe in storytelling, story acting. And Zoe's own, and this goes, I don't know the rest of you on screen, you all seem lovely people, but what's really exciting about what Ron's doing is the way, and what Renee is doing, is the way in which when we're in conversation with each other, we learn from each other and we pass on great ideas. And Gillian McNamee, whom Ron referred to before, she trained me as a graduate student at Erickson in storytelling and story acting. And then I trained teachers and I trained Zoe and it just goes on. And the wonderful thing about finding something you like Centers is that there are other people who want to talk to you about these things. And I write in one of my books I was going to leave the classroom. I didn't want to be a teacher anymore. I knew how to do it. I was good at it. I liked the children, I liked the parents, but it wasn't stimulating enough after, a long while. Until I found storytelling. And I found when I asked children, what's your story about? And they told me, one day there was a tiger and then it became a real tiger. And you'd say, well, what does that mean? What do you mean it became a real tiger? Wasn't it a real tiger before? No, Miss Cooper, it was a tiger and then it became a real tiger. Well, then you stop asking because he just told you it was a real, and you just go on and on and on. And once their little thoughts started spilling onto the paper, I totally recommitted. And that was, I don't know, 34 years ago. So, I mean, conversation is the way to go in teacher ed and teaching, or you'll like directors, you have to. Anyway, but Ron, your classroom, and when I was in Taiwan and met with Yu Ching, and Jillian and a group of us have meet together. I think it's thrilling. I didn't know you were doing the work too. And I know Yu Ching has trained other people, but I just like, how exciting is this? Renee wrote me an email and said, we're doing this. I just encourage everybody on the screen to find partners, talk to, collaborate with. It's the way to go.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying, Patsy, because when I had this idea to do this kind of informal talk, and I thought about my book, I'll do it around my book, but it really isn't about my book. It's really just everybody we're learning from each other. We're talking to each other. We're connecting to each other. And it's not how I first envisioned it. It's much better than the way I envisioned it, Nice. And in terms of Zoe, I didn't teach together with Zoe because she came to 321 after I left 321. And I'm trying to think, Zoe, you're here. I'm trying to think about it. I think that Liz Phillips, the principal at 321, got in touch with me and said, would you be willing to talk with our new teacher, Zoe? She's really interested in choice time. And that's when we got together and talked about it.
Okay.
And then I visited your classroom, and that's the first time I saw storytelling in action, and it was really exciting. It was a little bit different because you did something, I remember, where you were recording it you were using carbon paper or something. You were recording it, and one copy stayed with you, one copy stayed with the child, went to the child. I can't remember, there were 3 copies. I just remember 3 copies, and
one goes home. You use carbon paper, old-fashioned carbon paper.
Yes, I know. I still have it.
Yeah, I know. But actually, the young people in my classes, they don't even know what it is. But we use carbon paper because you write it on the piece of paper on top. That piece goes with the child, and that goes home. And then one copy goes to the class book of stories. And then when I was working with Zoe, I kept a 3rd copy because Zoe's class shows up in my book on Paley, which is in Chinese, by the way. There's a full, 2 chapters on Zoe's classroom.
Really?
So yeah, on the stories those kids told, and what Zoe and I were trying to figure out exactly what Ron is saying. What do they mean? Why do they say that? What is the metaphor? That's what made it so interesting. And it made them happy. That's the really thing. They were very happy.
But Zoe, I remember you telling me also that one thing that really interested you and stood out was that how children who couldn't use language very well for their storytelling at the beginning, the more they listened to other children doing it, the richer their storytelling became, or something like that. Maybe, I don't know if you want to say something about it, but I remember it's that stayed in my head too. About
definitely. And having the binder of all of the books, the class stories, you could look across the year. It's a year's worth of the whole class's stories, and you could just, so each child would have a chance to tell and act a story several times, lots of times across the year. And you could see from story to story how their language developed and their confidence and their stories, the things that they were talking about, the things that they were interested in. sometimes they stuck to one theme across the whole year.
That's-
They were really committed to it.
I could
But that was
picture
great
children
too,
who did
because
that.
they explored that theme
Mhm.
all the way.
Right.
It's,
Ron, do
it's
you do
making
that?
me
Do you,
miss that.
Ron, do you keep track, do you keep the stories? Do you keep a binder or something with the stories that the children are telling?
Yes, maybe not a binder, but now we scan them. So we can do it that way, but I tried and made in different ways to encourage the teachers to put it in a binder because I feel maybe I'm old fashioned, but I feel like flipping through the binder is easier than flipping through the scanned images of all the stories. And but yeah, we do try to keep track of that and try to see how the themes have evolved, and also for us to keep track of how the language is developing.
That's, I
No.
that's kind of interesting, yeah. Patsy?
Well, Ron brought up, he tries to, and I don't know how many of you on screen are directors or classroom teachers, but in training teachers, and if I would show up with a binder, a big fat binder with all the slipcases in it and the class and I'd have the kids, and then I have all the kids' names, on little pocket files, so that the teacher didn't have to do that work. So that but you need the carbon. You can say scan. Here's my feeling, and it may sound old fashioned, but if you give teachers one more thing to do, they're not going to do it. They're just too busy. They're just too busy. So the carbon paper, you don't do anything but say, put this one in your cubby. You take the copy the carbon has made and you put it in the binder. One less thing to do. No scanning, no thinking about it. In fairness to the teachers, you have to make it easier on, but that's always fun. I like all that about the storytelling, because the teachers became, as Vivian spoke about stories like they were prayers, but from a teacher's point of view, they were just this. I like that part of teacher education as well.
I'm wondering, so the other teachers who haven't spoken yet, is this new to many of you, or have any of you heard of this before or tried it? I don't know what the background is here. Yeah. Kim, what about you? Have you heard of this before, the storytelling, or is this something new for you?
Something new for me. This sounds very interesting, though.
Yeah, it's something I've read a lot of Vivian Gusson Paley's books, but not all of them. And now I'm hearing of other ones that I want to read. I had a very kind of, you can't say you can't play. I took it too literally, I think, maybe, and tried it out in my classroom. And it just became a little bit overwhelming, but I think maybe I took it too literally. Sometimes I would do that. I think I didn't think it through enough. I read the book. I was really excited,
Mhm.
I kind of tried to introduce it, but
Well, we just experimented too, because when I heard about it in that class, I just started reading about her and reading one of her books. I think it was The Boy with the Helicopter.
Boy, who would
It's a
be
long
hell.
title. Yeah, love that one. Maybe it's because it's the first book I read, but I really love that one. But we just experimented. It's just like the next day I came to the school, Little Seeds only at the time. I said, guys, this is Vivian Paley. This is what she does. We need to try this. Let's find some time. Let's block out some time. And within a week, because it's so lightweight, dictating stories. And soon these Mandarin speaking children, at the time we had to stop them because it was a full page of their story, just continuing, going on. We had to introduce the concept of, to be continued, and the children loved it. And then the acting, we just said, okay, now we're just going to act it out. And they're just doing it. It was just so, it's like guerrilla warfare. We're just trying it. And then we've just evolved since then. And now we find it's in many different places, not just story dictation, story acting, but You know, in choice time, we're just doing different things. Eventually, they're looking at a town to build a city, and then from there, they created stories about that too. We encouraged them to create stories there. So even there were some props, because I know a lot of the story acting we don't create props. It's just very
Right.
impromptu, very Paley style. And then, but then sometimes there are props. If it's during their play, they're still, you know, using these things to create different aspects of it, and it's okay too.
Right.
And I remember watching Yu Ching Huang doing story acting so masterfully. He actually had children become props. Because I think there was a story about an ice cream cart, and they said, "Who wants to be the ice cream cart? Okay, you come here." And she just bent him over, and then they were having a blast doing that whole thing. And it was just really, it's just really about experimentation, and that's the great thing about Vivian Paley's work, because it's just so lightweight. And if you have, I guess because I'm in the position as the owner and director of the school, I can just say, okay, we're going to make way, you know, we'll make way for this program. But I think even in your own classroom as a teacher, you can find ways to incorporate it and just experiment, jump right in.
Patsy, I'm trying to encourage Ron to present about this at Bank Street, at the kindergarten conference.
Actually, I've presented every year on it at Bank Street. But I will talk with Ron and
Maybe something,
see,
yeah,
see what we can get going there.
yeah.
Okay, I find, Renee, I find that a lot of teachers learn about Paley in teacher education courses. And are you still there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I see you. I mean,
You see me? Well, I don't see you folks anymore. So can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I can't see you, so I'm just going to talk to my Outlook. Okay, so I find a lot of teachers know about Paley because they heard about it once in teacher education courses, but Paley would have been 94 this year, I believe. She died a couple of summers ago. And as teacher educators age, new teacher educators don't know her, don't know Paley's work as well. And therefore, young teachers don't know about Paley. So I mean, at the School Literacy and Culture Project at Rice, which I founded at Rice University in Houston, is still extremely active. And I do work with them in spreading the word through what we call the Classroom Storytelling Project throughout the Texas area. And we have conferences, and some of them are online, but it really goes to who's teaching the teachers. And often in a school, if a teacher learns it, she'll teach it to somebody else. But so, I mean, I try to keep the Paley work going, but there we are.
Do you know Kristen Eno?
Yes.
She's there and she's presenting on Friday, tomorrow, no, Friday morning.
At NEYC, where I am. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she said she's trying to get together, like she wants a group of people who are doing this. She wants to
Well, we talked about that, Renee, and I'll talk with Kristen again. We were on our way, and then the New York City DOE, for those of you familiar with it, just kind of went, kind of
PS
early childhood
27,
program.
PS
Yeah.
27 Red Book, right?
Yeah, but it all has to do with the DOE. Anyway, but I don't want to take any more time. I mean, I know you have.
No, I think this is like an hour. We keep an hour going or so, and we don't go too long. But I think I haven't heard of anybody else want to say anything. Or
I just want to thank Ron for sharing this work, and also I got sad the other day thinking that this was going to end, because every week I do take something from our discussions and it's impacted my classroom. And I love hearing the stories of other people. If anybody wants to have some sort of future, occasional get together I would love to pick your brains and see more examples of your work. I think this is so important to talk and dialogue with other people. And also I use storytelling, the Vivian Gusson Paley, when I taught preschool, and we used it over Zoom during COVID. When we were on Zoom, that was one thing that we could do, is play together, because playing on the screen was doing some storytelling. That was my storytelling connection. But also, I don't want to lose contact with you guys. Let's let me pick your brains.
It's interesting that you say that because, you know, Patsy, I sort of like publicly came out and said that I'm not doing consulting work anymore. You know, I'm stopping work, which was for me a very big emotional. It just is, you know, like, it's not like you where you're connected with the university and do all sorts of things. I'm stopping, you know, I'm just not doing it. And I don't quite know what I'm doing now. And this keeps me connected. You know, it gives me a connection, and I look forward to Tuesdays so much, you know, and it's not like a pressure thing. It's just so interesting meeting teachers from all around. So maybe we will keep it going in some way. It, you know, doesn't, you know, I started it with this, you know, and now let's put this aside and maybe we could even do something like this and maybe read a Paley book together or do something. I don't know.
I really encourage you to do that. I think teachers are hungry for it. And I think there's a lot of things teachers, like Ron said, you know, and then he read Vygotsky, and then he read like people like, I'd like to know more. I want to discuss more, and I need a group. And these Zoom chats, I think, really do work. I think you're on to something great.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Well, maybe next week we could talk about that a bit. And I think,
mean, I've been practicing Newfoundland.
Newfoundland, yes.
Woohoo!
We have a group who are
You're getting there.
from Newfoundland. Who's from Newfoundland here? Wendy and David and Trudy and Bethany. Anybody else? And
Melissa.
They're all from Newfoundland. And I met some of them, how many years ago? 3 years ago, was it?
Yeah, 3 years ago at our LIFT conference, the literacy conference.
Yeah, and I went when I went there. It was the only time I was in Canada, actually, you know, to go back to Canada.
You came to the right spot in Canada if you're just going to visit at that time.
It was.
Maybe we can convince you to come back someday.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, that
Can I add one little thought? I wanted to also thank Ron and Patricia and yourself, Renee, obviously. But also the thing that struck me, I think, in just watching that, it was new for me. And I've only been 2.5 years, maybe a little longer, with primary, elementary age kids. A lot of my training was with older students. And the thing that struck me the most was I thought about the need for this as a bridging into older literacy, older student literacy. When I work with older students, I often find that their associative understanding of how rich a single word can be is fairly limited. Language gets flattened out, I find. The older students sort of get, part of that I think is just the way that the imagination gets sort of sorted in our pop culture, the kinds of mediums we consume primarily. But with kids, and even it was in the video, I can't remember what the word was, it was cold, and there was just an immediate, in the action, this embodiment of a shiver that went along with cold, right? Like that embodying of the language, I think, makes it so visceral and real that you add dimensions to words, to what language can be. You start to see it. We play games with our older students around adverbs, just getting them to see that adverbs actually are actions that modify what a verb looks like. And they're often amazed because they say they don't know what an adverb is. And I think that through what you're doing in this approach, you know, if you can stretch that out into kids being a little older and stretch that into the way their imaginations work when they're reading, that capacity to see language through stories that they're reading just stretches out and becomes richer too. So for me, that was very striking. I really like that.
If I can add here, we've used this work with struggling older readers because a lot of times struggling readers don't have the same relationship to the words they say and the words on paper. And so when you say to a 4th or 5th grader, and we've had experience with this, you don't have to write it. I'll write it down. Just tell me the story you want to tell me. And eventually they come around to taking charge of the pen and the pencil and writing down the story. But just to coach them as they tell the story they want to tell. I don't understand. Tell me what happened. Oh, really? I don't know. Who are we talking about now? And you get them to clarify their thoughts and to say, oh, that sounds like, and you make associative vocabulary words for them. And I think it's been The research on the younger children shows how much it enhances their reading and vocabulary, and especially for bilingual children. So the research on the older children isn't there except anecdotally, but I've had a lot of success with older kids over the years, just to build on the point you've made.
When I was in Newfoundland, all right, and I did one of my workshops, reminded me of it. I think it was the last workshop that I did at that conference. When I asked the participants what grades so it was all about inquiry and choice time, the connection between inquiry and choice time, I think, if I remember correctly. And when I asked what grades it was a whole lot of like middle school teachers there. And I panicked. I absolutely panicked. I thought, I haven't taught middle school. They're going to be bored. But they were the most excited about this. And I actually got emails from some of them afterwards about how this really made them think a lot about what they wanted to do in their classrooms and what the classrooms were missing. And it was pretty exciting. It was really pretty exciting. So, like Ron, when I hear about your school, I think, okay, I want it to go higher. I want 7-year-olds in there, okay? And then I want 8-year-olds in there. I want more children to have this like very rich experience, and being myself a product of public schools and having taught for so many years in public school, I have a strong feeling about public schools. And I thought, I want what you're doing in a private school to spill over to the public schools, and yes, Patsy, we deal with these awful bureaucracies, and I mean, just from, I don't know if you looked at the video from last week, but just from Lauren's class in this public charter school, they want to call it a public school, it's really not, but as soon as a new administration comes in, they squash whatever was happening. And what was happening was so exciting. And now those kids don't have that experience anymore. So it's something to always fight for, I guess. And I'm not exactly sure how we fight for it, but if enough of us kind of got together, I always try to if I did a workshop for teachers, I would think, this should not be for teachers. This should be for administrators, because teachers are so eager to really do what's right for the children, and they're squashed by the administration. So it's the administration that really has to listen to this. We have to think about that and how we get that done. But anyway, I guess I will have to say goodbye to you because it's getting later and you are all having worked all day. But we'll keep it. Well, we're definitely meeting next week, right? And then we're not going to meet the week after that because I'll be away, and we'll meet again on the 13th of December, and then we'll decide where we're going to go from there. How does that sound? I just yes. David, did you want to say something? Was that you? No?
I might jump in, Renee.
Yes, please, Wendy. Oh, yes, and Wendy is a new principal, a new
Yeah,
administrator.
but actually this has nothing to do with it. And I'm sorry if I'm going to throw someone under the bus here right now, but there is someone in the group who has just recently finished their PhD.
Yes, Trudy. We have to clap for
Yes.
you, Trudy. Yay.
Thank you.
I'm sure it was tons of work, right?
Tons of work, tons of a great feeling of accomplishment now, though.
Yes, I'm sure. I'm very impressed, Thank you for mentioning that, Wendy. I hope you're having a big celebration at home.
Oh, yes.
So anyway, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll see you all next week and have a really terrific week. Okay, I'm so enjoying this. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for listening.